Hi. This very serious video is out of place on my channel, but I have a platform where I can talk about anything, even if it's a relatively really small one. So this isn't going to be the best edited video because honestly this isn't the most fun topic to script or edit. Mostly this is a way for me to get my thoughts out for some of the things I'm going to talk about may or may not happen. Because I wouldn't bother making a video about this if I didn't think it was really important. Trust me, I wish we were in a reality where I felt I didn't have to make this. To get to the point, the incoming administration might be the administration most against the public good in American history, and I don't say that lightly. It's also an administration full of contradictions, which are pretty obvious when looking at cabinet picks, where a Russian propagandist is head of national intelligence and a literal known PDF file was set to be attorney general. But that one was eventually walked back, but not before the entire Republican House tried to cover it up. Possibly the most egregious pick is RFK Jr. as head of Health and Human Services, the same person that is going to be in one of the most important health positions in a country of over 300 million is also responsible for killing dozens of children in Samoa by deliberately spreading lies about vaccinations. And he's done plenty of more heinous things that I don't think I can even talk about. Now, unfortunately, these cabinet picks aren't surprising coming from Trump. What is surprising is the degree that this is acceptable to the American people. You can compare the way JD Vance talks about women or Trump talks about Hispanic people and then compare it to how the voting turned out. And it becomes obvious that people are able to tolerate politicians that openly hate them under the justification that they will lower prices or miraculously fix the economy. The problem with this excuse is that it's just that. It's an excuse. Trump has practically already thrown away his promise to lower prices, so there's that. But it was also glaringly obvious that this was never going to happen. There isn't a magic button that lowers prices. Trump has two policy proposals that will massively increase prices, and only one candidate had proposals to reduce them. When people were blindly shown policy proposals without knowing the candidate behind them, most people backed Harris. The majority of people also support abortion access, but then voted for the former president who appointed the judges that killed Roe v. Wade, and also killed and will continue to kill a lot of women and newborns with it. Those who need prices to go down to survive aren't going to ignore the fact that Trump's policies are across the board terrible for prices, and that's what most economists agree on. That's why I say it's an excuse. It's a way to have a sympathetic justification to hide behind the reality, which is that the reason so many people voted this way is because they are told to hate certain groups of people and act accordingly. There are other areas where what the new administration promises and says and what they actually do are complete contradictions, but this is the most egregious example. The new administration will be massively influenced by Elon Musk, so you can expect wealth inequality to be supercharged and the tax burden pushed more and more to people who can't afford it. Also, I forgot to mention, but the chairperson of the FTC, Lina Khan, who has been suing tons of companies for monopolistic practices and a lot of anti-consumer actions, is being replaced by a pro-business dude who will let the new administration and their friends do whatever corrupt practices they want. Because free market capitalism is when monopolies go unchecked and destroy all the competition. And instead of billions worth of pre-built military equipment going to stop Russia from destroying Ukraine, instead billions will be spent so the government can buy Bitcoin. So I hope everyone's happy. But despite how obvious this scam is, the billionaire president-elect tricked people into thinking he's looking out for the little guy. When Musk wants to cut $2 trillion from government spending and is going to use the party that's been wanting to gut Social Security and Medicaid for decades to do it, then what's getting cut is pretty clear. And again, people already know this. Googling things is very easy. The fact that it takes 15 seconds to reach all the information known, but still most people aren't informed, shows that it may be impossible to ever get to a point that's better than when it was not even possible to fact check things. And honestly, that's pretty depressing. The big takeaway from all of this is that groups who are constantly insulted and attacked on a degree that would sink any other campaign are willing to vote for someone who says they'll fix something while proposing policies that'll make it much worse. People don't care about the blatant authoritarianism and disregard for democracy to a degree that no president has ever had, or the attacks on the Constitution. A plurality of Americans will throw away their conservative constitutional principles and let themselves get screwed over by the ultra-rich if it means that some minority that they're constantly told to hate will have their lives completely destroyed. And the Harris campaign towards the end was arguably more center-right than center-left, leaving people they should have supported behind in the process, but that's still not enough for so many people. People voted for the furthest right administration in US history, full of some of the most deranged, unqualified, and evil people there are. An administration whose solution to every problem is to round people up into camps, and after running an obviously sham idea that they would be anti-war, want to now invade Mexico and are talking about invading Panama, Greenland, and literally Canada, which is incomprehensibly unhinged. Meanwhile, Ukraine defending itself is something to be mocked. An expansionist warmongering state that wants to round undesirables up does sound a bit familiar. familiar. And this gets at what I think is the most evil thing this government wants, which is the forceful imprisonment and deportation of over 11 million people, or about 3% of the entire American population. It's hard to put into words how evil this is, and it should be an easy deal breaker for any voter who even cares the slightest about basic human decency. Such an action would temporarily increase the US population by 6 or 7 times. Almost 1 million children would be imprisoned, and that's assuming it isn't extended to citizens with undocumented parents. Even if this is temporary before deportation, subjecting millions of families to this trauma is so vile that it's hard to believe anyone is okay with it, let alone half of all voters. This planned operation, which will involve forceful invasions of blue states and deportation raids on previously protected places like churches and schools to, I guess, kidnap children, is led by Tom Homan, who engineered the policy of family separations. He takes joy in the fact that he's going to force hundreds of thousands of families to make the decision on whether to leave their children in the United States or take them with them to the camps. For these monsters, cruelty isn't just a means to a racist end, it is the point. If you ask the Republican Party why they're doing one of the most cruel and economically destructive actions in this country's history, they will tell you that it's because they're all violent criminals, or at least a large enough portion to make this necessary. This is plain and simple a total lie. There is no evidence that undocumented immigrants commit crime at a higher rate than natural-born citizens, and more likely than not, it's less. That's the truth, and everyone who yells for deportations knows it. But the classic fascist trick is to point to crimes committed by individuals to then justify violence against an entire group, including children, based on that. I don't know what to tell anyone who genuinely believes this is a justification. The undocumented population is similar in size to the population of North Carolina. Should we deport the entire population of North Carolina? Because every year hundreds of North Carolinians commit murder. So obviously, if their stated reasoning is completely baseless and they know it, then that means there is another reason for why they're doing this. And unfortunately, the reason is actually very simple. 19% of the American population is Hispanic. It was projected to be a quarter of the population by roughly around 2060. By stirring up hatred against Hispanic immigrants and making shit up and stretching how many people they can deport by trying to get rid of constitutionally enshrined birthright citizenship, they're hoping to cut this number down to about 15% of the population and then keep it from growing so that white people can remain the majority in the country for the rest of the century. And I know what I said might sound insane, but that's because the truth of why they want this to happen is something the Democratic Party refuses to bring up against Republicans. Now, I don't think Trump is constantly thinking that this is why he's doing this. I think he's told himself and been told that undocumented immigrants are evil and no amount of facts or reasoning is going to fix his broken brain that's stuck in that rut. But he's absolutely surrounded by people who are 100% aware of the white supremacist reasons for this. I really don't think the guy who thinks asylum seekers are the same as insane asylum patients and therefore thinks millions of people are coming from insane asylums is the person you want in charge of immigration, or the guy who thinks other countries pay tariffs to be in charge of the economy. But here we are. But back to what I was saying, the Republican Party and this new administration include people who aren't white, of course, but that's because it's white supremacy, not white ethno-nationalism, which means that minorities are tolerated as long as they serve the leadership, and the majority who aren't subservient can be shot in the streets or shredded by barbed wire and then get mocked for it. And if a group becomes too close to threatening the majority status as the majority, then there's no bounds to the lies and cruelty that will be used to ensure that doesn't happen. Now, something that a lot of people might counter what I say with, including a lot of Latino Republicans, is just look at how many Latino Americans voted for Trump. Now, I'm not going to do a deep dive into the reasons these insane statistics happened. Here's some rapid fire reasons for why on screen. Florida, for example, is full of right-wing Caribbean-descended Americans who voted for 10% of Miami-Dade County to be thrown into the back of a truck and driven to private prisons, their own neighbors and family members. So if what they voted for materializes, then unfortunately a lot of people will realize the tragic mistake they've made. And also, when National Guards from red states are sent to arrest minorities, there's obviously going to be racial profiling of anyone who's even a little bit brown, which will lead to an atmosphere of fear, especially for people in areas where the non-white population is small and easier to single out, as well as harassment from deportation officers. All this deportation hysteria will also lead to a huge spike in hate crimes. But this wouldn't be the first time Trump has fueled such things. Every demographic shot themselves in the foot this election and shifted far to the right, with the exception of black women. Now, I don't want to talk about myself too much in this video, especially since I know for various reasons I have it and will have it much better than a lot of people in this country. I'm not a victim here. I also never thought I would be bringing up my race on this channel because honestly, no one cares. and I've always tried not to care. But when the president thinks people like me have poison blood and doesn't even know what a mixed race person is, it kind of forces me to think about it, even if I wish I didn't have to. For me, thinking about my younger self, who was just some kid who thought racism wasn't going to be a problem in America, seeing what people overwhelmingly voted for is pretty disappointing. And it's important to mention that if they're willing to lie to destroy the lives of undocumented immigrants and their children, many of whom came to America as kids, and have been here for decades, then that means the fascist hate machine can just as easily target any other group with whatever methods they see fit, because morality is obviously already thrown out the window. Just look at how a tweet by a literal Nazi can within days reach all the way up to Trump, who will then spread lies that could cause a pogrom on a day's notice and promise to destroy the lives of 15,000 people over it. There were most likely more undocumented immigrants in 2008 than today, and the way in which people came into America from Ellis Island 100 years ago is a simpler process than applying for asylum at the border or getting a visa and then overstaying it, because immigrants want a better life for themselves and their families and actually believe in the promise of America that people born in the United States killed 2 months ago. People are voting for policies that would have had their European ancestors thrown into prison a century ago. Nothing about what is going to be done to immigration policy is making it great again, because in the good old days that the MAGA movement misses, immigration was even more open than today, at least for one group of people, because it's obviously going back when it comes to a different group. One policy is welcoming and one is cruel, because there's a difference between these two waves of immigrants. This is a manufactured crisis that uses genocidal, dehumanizing propaganda in order for the Republican Party to achieve their racist, extremist goals. This is all also disappointing, not just for who I am as a person, but also as an American. I'm not an expert on American history, but it is something that I've been interested in and learning about for years. And I can confidently say, even as I always try to avoid recency bias, this was seriously a contender for the most important election in American history. And I know that sounds like recency bias, but sometimes it's necessary to acknowledge when something really significant is happening. And that gets at why I'm making a video that frankly is very awkward to script, record, and post on a channel where most people subscribe to watch Godzilla videos, because I recognize how dangerous this moment is and I have things to say about it. Bottom line is that in this election, the country had a choice on whether authoritarianism, racism, and violence were still the dominant forces in the United States of America in 2024 and 2025. And after nearly 250 years of independent history, this country completely failed the moment, and now the consequences are coming. No president has wanted to be a dictator to nearly this degree before. We are in uncharted territory, and Trump's Supreme Court is helping out by providing immunity for any action. The Heritage Foundation in their Project 2025 agenda, written by people that don't represent the majority of us, promises to hollow out America to be devoured by billionaires and soon trillionaires that disregards, looks down on, and oppresses every single minority that can possibly be classified as such. And they lay the groundwork for firing over 1 million qualified federal employees to be replaced by MAGA loyalists. Project 2025 is the conservative agenda for this country without any of the propaganda pretending it's for your or anyone's good. This election might make me hate America, but I still don't hate it as much as these psychopaths do. I seriously can only scratch the surface in this video of all the awful things the Heritage Foundation has given the Trump administration to do. But it's just one example out of a myriad of horrible things I could pick. They want to weaken, break up, and commercialize the NOAA, which is the agency that warns people that hurricanes are coming. If you still aren't convinced that these people hate you, then I don't know what to tell you. And there are so many more examples like this that'll hurt the American people, but I don't have forever to talk about it. One thing I will mention though, for how horrible it is that the document made specifically for the Trump administration wants to ban and imprison people for creating and distributing pornography, which is already a huge authoritarian infringement on the people's rights from the party of personal freedom and small government, and puts anyone who makes adult content at serious risk. But what's far worse than even that is that on the same page, they essentially state that all transgender people are propagating pornography by just existing. They aren't subtle about yet another group of people they want to eradicate. Add in the fact that they are clearly willing to declare anyone as sexually degenerate if they decide it, and then call for executions because of it. I don't need to explain how evil this is and the possible violence that would be the result if they got what they wanted. I can make a whole video of the similarities between the modern Republican Party and the Nazis. In so many ways, they are mirror images today. Let it sink in that fascism, the thing America and the world fought and died against in World War II, is coming to the United States right now in our lifetimes, and we'll have to see if the American system is robust enough to stop their worst plans from happening. Half of the people in the first Trump administration tried to warn the country that he's a full-on fascist, so the second Trump administration is instead filled with some of the most vile cabinet picks that is the most far-right, authoritarian, warmongering, anti-women, anti-child, pro-death, anti-Semitic, and Nazi-connected, economically greedy, anti-health, anti-constitution, anti-life, liberty, and happiness, and anti-American administration this country has in many ways ever seen. But maybe racist violence and oppressive greed supported by the people is the most American thing ever. Is an administration so bad that abolishing the Department of Education when teachers need more support is now overshadowed because there's so much worse shit? They're doing this because they want to make the whole country like Florida, where anything teaching history from the perspective of or telling the story of any minority group can be banned. Hey, future editing me again. Another thing that threatens to lead to a lot of violence is Trump's promise to grant total police immunity and try and implement nationwide stop and frisk. When police killings are already on the rise, this policy could have some very bad outcomes, and I don't need to tell you what demographics this will disproportionately harm, from harassment by police to murder, or I guess legal killing. I swear this video could be twice as long and I would still have more horrible things to talk about. They really want to make things worse in this country in every imaginable area. From using the military against civilians and political opponents on American soil to tariffs, which I barely touched on, but will damage our and all of our allies' economies terribly and destroy America's global reputation, more than it already has been. But back to what Pasmi was saying. There are two countries in the world where people support Trump more than they do in America, and those countries are Russia and Israel, which also happen to be the countries actively murdering the most people. Russia has been wanting this for decades, and they've gotten what they wanted. America, with one election, lost to Russia over 30 years after the Cold War, and now has gotten magnitudes closer to resembling its worst enemies in its history. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think it's actually likely that Canada or Panama get invaded. I also think it's possible for the mass deportations to fail to materialize because, ironically, the capitalist greed puppeting Trump recognizes the economic importance of immigrants to the economy. Final future me interjection, if there's even such a thing as a silver lining in Trump winning, is that we're going to go from the year he was the most popular to the year he's probably going to be the least popular. But just look at the horrible way that they've responded to the Los Angeles fires, attacking firefighters and talking about holding back aid, and it's obvious it's going to be a very long 4 years. Everyone who's been talking about the deep state and the swamp have voted for a literal shadow president oligarch, so great job, guys. I'm sure economic war with Canada, who supplies us with oil and connects Alaska, will be great for American energy because Trump's gonna fix everything. And also the Republican lead in the House of Representatives being razor thin will hopefully cause the administration plenty of roadblocks. I don't talk much about the Democratic Party in this video. People can hate the Biden administration for both valid and ridiculous reasons, and there are real problems in America today, but the point is that the Republican Party is aiming to make all of them worse, and their policies are designed to attack the American people. You can be a socialist or a center-right conservative. I don't care. Just please, for humanity's sake, don't vote for this evil organization that we call a political party. Anything good about it from the past is now reversed, and all that is left is the post-truth, hate-fueled cult of Donald Trump that will melt you into biofuel. I'm hoping that I can look back on this video and feel like it was overdramatic, because if it doesn't feel that way, then that means the worst things they say they are going to do happened. Good things and victories against evil can still happen in the world, and that will continue to happen in places even if evil is in charge. If things hopefully turn out less horrible than expected though, then that doesn't absolve anyone who voted for Trump of what they voted for. They still voted for over 1 million kids to be thrown into cages. They still voted for over 500,000 married couples to be torn apart, and who knows how many non-married couples. They still voted for children to never see their friends again, and for tens of millions of people to have their families destroyed based on complete lies to fulfill the desires of white supremacist fascists who don't care about anyone in this country in the slightest. And they voted for echoes of the same lies, hatred, and methods that were the basis of the worst event in history. And if the next 4 years feel hardly worse than the last 4, or if it's something unspeakably horrible, what 77 million people voted for stays the same. History will not look kindly back on Donald Trump and MAGA, so it's best to get away from it as soon as possible. Also, I forgot to mention anything related to climate change and how they want to destroy the entire planet, which will kill everyone and everything on it. Okay, bye.